All right, let's go ahead and get started. So good evening, everyone. My name is Jess Robinson, and I'm one of the program managers for the Savanna Institute. And so just for anyone who's new, who's joining into the Nutshell series, the Savanna Institute is a nonprofit organization that works in collaboration with farmers and scientists to develop perennial food and fodder crops with diverse, multifunctional systems grounded in ecology and inspired by the savanna biome. And so tonight, I'm really excited to introduce Chris Patton. So Chris is going to build on Terry Durham's previous nutshell on growing elderberry for health and profit. He's going to take it forward into this amazing crop's potential commercial future and Midwest Elderberry Cooperative's role in that future and how that can benefit elderberry growers, including those for whom elderberry is not even a primary crop. So as founding director and president of the Midwest Elderberry Cooperative and CEO of the River Hills Harvest Marketers, LLC, Chris brings extensive knowledge about marketing shelf-stable finished products for River Hills Harvest brand throughout the Midwest and expanding beyond. And so I'm going to go ahead and get his PowerPoint started, and we're going to go ahead and switch it over.
Thank you, Jess.
Yeah,
okay. Well, I started Midwest Elderberry Cooperative in 2012, and I did that with Paul Otten, and I farmed with Paul at his place north of Stillwater, Minnesota, called Natura Farms for about 6 years pretty actively as we were getting elderberry started there. And I think if it hadn't been for Paul, I'm not sure I would have started the co-op because I've done a lot of growing and I'd been taking classes in agriculture and permaculture and all this kind of thing. But there's a big difference between taking some classes and having 40, 50 years of experience like Paul had. And he had it, particularly in all kinds of berries. And he loved black currants and red currants and white currants. And I learned a great deal from him. And he did pass away a year ago. And the co-op has gotten far more busy on the business side of things. And so I haven't been quite as active actually growing as I used to be on the farm. But I do have a permacultured yard with elderberries, raspberries, northern kiwi, service berries, cherries, apples, grapevines, quite a few things here. So when I get a little stir crazy from sitting in front of the computer, I can go out and get my toes and fingers into the dirt and see what I have growing. And my garlic's starting to come up right now already. But tonight you might sort of say we're doing probability thinking. I first heard Terry in 2011 at Moses in La Crosse, Wisconsin, talking about elderberry. And to me, that was possibility thinking at that point in time. I could see the possibilities. I could see the huge potential. And at the time, I was looking at buying some land and making it pay. And simply because I didn't have a lot saved up for retirement, and I didn't trust the stock market, having been a broker for 6 years and listed, with a New York Stock Exchange license, et cetera. But I did want to perhaps get back to something a little similar to how I grew up. I grew up in what would be commonly called a hobby farm in southern New Hampshire, and we had maybe a quarter-acre garden, and I had access to acres of wild blueberries, and we had quite a few wild grapes and things. And this formed my perspective and approach to life a lot as a youth. And it was kind of neat. I lived pretty close to the Massachusetts border, and I'd go off and wander in the woods and kid myself or ask the question, oh, am I in New Hampshire or in Massachusetts? And so I really liked rural America, and I sort of missed the fact that I couldn't farm because my grandfather had lost his farm back in the 1920s, when potato prices crashed. But he went on, interestingly enough, and in the early 30s, he got his license as a naturopath and massage therapist, and he spent 30 years as a naturopath. So I grew up with a very strong orientation towards taking care of the environment and having food be your medicine, and looking at plants in particular as a source for life and healing. And so when I was going into college, that MA down there behind my name is in archaeology. And so I have a very varied perspective. The MBA was in business, of course. And the MA, though, was in archaeology with a minor in prehistory, old world prehistory. So I studied paleo environments, the rise and fall of civilizations, and how they're connected to commercial agriculture, and how basically how cities without a viable hinterland collapse upon themselves. And so to me, the crisis we're facing with the spread in the economic world, where it's hard for most people to make enough, and then you have a few that make an awful lot, and the fact that rural economy has struggled, and we've got all of this technology coming into things. And so when I was looking at all this thing with the elderberry, it seemed to me that a cooperative would be the best balance to help the growers, and that it could be flexible to help growers of different sizes and sort of balance between the need to share and to have incentives for individual reward and initiative and the risks that are taking. So let's go on to the next slide now, Jess, please. So in 2012, I wanted to say, okay, just what is the potential for elderberry in this country? Because we had only a couple hundred acres that we knew of that were being grown commercially. And so I took some of that MBA background, and I did a projection that 22,500 acres could be supported pretty easily without having to really stress or go beyond replacing imported elderberry, because over 95% of the elderberry used in this country right now is imported, mostly as a concentrate. Could be reconcentrated, or they'll put it as elderberry juice on a label, for instance, on an American product, but it's actually coming from Europe. And that's our big competition, and we'll get back to that a little bit later, because Europe has had an established elderberry industry. It's part of their culture, goes all the way back to Hippocrates, who wrote a whole book on elderberry alone. And so it's got infrastructure there and everything else. Whereas here, it was the Native Americans who grew it. The pioneers came over, they saw it, they said, yes, I remember this from Europe, but this is too much work. I'll just leave some along the edges of the fields and things, and I can make my own jams, pies, or wine, or whatever I want with the elderberry that's there, but I'm not going to grow it commercially. Well, we have a situation right now where the environment needs help, and elderberry is particularly good as being a perennial, and can be used in a lot of different ways through permaculture. Doesn't necessarily need to be a primary crop in order to return a good amount of money for the acres devoted. In fact, the largest grower in the early years of the co-op here in Iowa is primarily corn, soybean, and hogs, and he has 16 acres of elderberry. So that's kind of where we're coming into this. Now, the other thing is that certified organic is important. It's not really that important if you're just a small grower and you're selling directly to people that you know. But in the marketplace, what's imported is certified organic. And so as far as going into retail products in any kind of large scale or as an ingredient, that is a definite requirement, and it opens up tremendous opportunities. If I'd had it this past fall, I could have sold 300,000 pounds of certified organic bulk frozen elderberries. Next, please. So, our elderberry here is called Sambucus canadensis. Some of the researchers put it as a subspecies of the European Nigra. That's debated. We'll let them do that, but it is the native elderberry. And what's really good about our native elderberry is that it tastes better than the European. But from a farmer and an economic perspective, you have basic questions. Am I going to be able to sell my crop? I don't want to make it a major focus of what I'm doing unless there's going to be a market for it. People are going to want to buy it. And then, are there unique challenges to elderberry? And where does it fit? Like a third crop is the term that's used for where it's not like a number one thing. Then what is the role of the co-op? How can it help growers and all that different things? And we'll go on. I'm not going to necessarily read everyone. Next, please. Every one of the lines, because that gets boring. I taught 14 years as an adjunct at night for, here up until about 2015 for Cardinal Stritch University and Bethel University, and I was teaching 2 to 4 nights a week, 4 hours a night, and I don't like just having the lines read. You can read those lines, and I'll try to keep my comments somewhat connected to them. So, you know, it's one thing to grow this wonderful native plant and just use it for yourself, friends, neighbors, or sell it to a couple local breweries or wineries or something. And it's another thing if we're going to push this far enough along so that it can compete with the imports and become a major factor or just another small specialty crop that can stand on its own and be viable economically. And if it can be viable economically, then I believe that we can take advantage of its environmental benefits and its potential health benefits to benefit many, many more people. And so, and all along the chain here, and in our co-op, our vision is for decentralized organization and primary development in rural areas. So while there will, of course, be stores in urban areas and distributors in some urban areas, we will have a lot of economic activity going on in rural America for this to succeed. There are a lot of people here in different classes and different kinds of jobs that can benefit from elderberry succeeding as a commercial crop. Next, please. So, and also at commercial value, our target is value is $2 a pound for harvested berries that are destemmed and sanitized and packed bulk frozen. And you can generally plan on, if you have any kind of decent soil, 4,000 pounds an acre. We have a number of growers who are getting 6,000 pounds an acre, just for a couple facts up front. Naturally, Sambucus canadensis is native east of the Rockies. We do have members in California and folks in Oregon and California that grow our Sambucus canadensis. There are species native to those areas that are different, and I won't get into that. If you go to the website, midwestelderberry.coop, C-O-O-P, I do have articles about that and some pictures and references so you can learn more about the different kinds of elderberry. And it loves full sun, but it can do well along habitat edges with partial shade. If it is in full shade, it might survive, but it will not yield anything worth mentioning as far as a crop. And year length is a factor in it. So like once we get to mid part of Minnesota and going north from there, I'd say the same for Wisconsin and the UP, it's going to be a matter of microenvironment and exposure as to whether you will be able to get a consistent crop. And if you're up there, I mean, I do have some growers in North Dakota. They're growing next to a vineyard, so it sounds like it could work. But other places, they'll get flowers and not always berries. So you'll see the easiest and the best time to see elderberry is end of June into July when they're blooming. You can see their big showy flowers all along the roadsides and along the windbreaks. Next, please. It is very popular because culture goes back. Elderberry's always been the berry of the people. You know, if you go to the oh, come on. I'll come again. Those British guys, they're so funny. You know, it talks about, you know, your father smells of elderberry, and that was a reference to elderberry wine. And elderberry wine was the wine of the people, whereas the nobles in ancient England drank the grape wine. So elderberry can be used in marginal land. It nourishes over 60 native pollinators. So we've got a good story here, soil retention. Dr. Daomi Zamora and I wrote a letter to Governor Dayton a few years ago about using elderberry as along for soil retention to control the runoff along the rivers and the drainage. It is useful for that. I mentioned him because it can be used for that, and unlike some things, there is a potential at some point for a crop, as well as supporting all the wildlife. And you can use it as a windbreak, and there is a great deal of variety in the native elderberry, and we'll get to that a little bit later. The one thing is though I have seen some people thinking that it can grow in fairly wet areas, and it doesn't. You have to put it on a berm or put it along the side of things and let it grow down as much as it wants. I mean, it likes to be near water, but not in it. Next, please. So here's some pictures. We've got some flowers there on the left, and you got an example here on the right of using the elderberry around the edge of a field as it's going in towards the woods. Next, please. So for commercial production, one area that we're looking at as a co-op is that you're going to have different strategies and different sizes for each grower. And as a co-op, that means the growers are going to have to cooperate because we don't have a lot of money. I started this with very little money, and I'm still not getting any kind of a regular salary. But I think that's primarily because we had a bad crop this last fall. Things would have been different if I'd been able to sell those 300,000 pounds. And I do think if I had 1 million pounds right now, I could probably sell it in a month or two. So we are looking to add growers, and Terry Durham is the main one on that. So do check out riverhillsharvest.com, and he does have a workshop coming up in early June that I will also be at that's oriented to that way. And there'll be some more specifics there. This is going to be a little bit more generalized in this case on the growing. So the main thing about it is that it is a perennial. Commercially, we do cut it down every year, which helps with control. And there is a lot of potential in the health benefits. And we have found that in the wild, there's a lot of variation, and it's not been studied well enough by any stretch of the imagination. And we may find out that identified cultivars, some of them might have more of the antioxidants or higher levels of more desirable antioxidants that the ongoing research may point out as being, say, particularly effective against stroke or dementia or Alzheimer's. And I have some articles on mouse studies about that done by the University of Missouri on the website. And so we sort of started out and we'd say, try a little of this, try a little bit of that. And that's okay for that area. But if you're going into commercial production, we're suggesting blocks of rows, because I have had a number of situations where you'll have one cultivar spread under the soil. They spread kind of like raspberries, so those rhizome runners, and it'll pop up in another row, and so your rows won't necessarily remain all the same cultivar, even if you planted them correctly to begin with. So with blocks of rows, that's not going to be an issue. Getting certified organic cuttings is one of the main problems about that right now, but we do have sources, and that is growing. You have the potential of cuttings as a crop or as a source of income, the flowers, fresh, frozen, or dried, and then the berry crops, fresh, frozen, or dried. Basically, for most of the field maintenance, it's a standard which you'd use for other small fruits and vegetables, but we do need special equipment for the destemming, and it is right now a hand harvest, and I do have some growers experimenting with some mechanical pickers. And as I mentioned earlier, on average, you could look at 4,000 to 6,000 pounds an acre, and we're looking at that 75 cents is about the cost of operations, 75 cents to $1, and so then what we can get over that is what's going to be profit for the grower. Next, please. So some organic production challenges, mostly it's pretty similar to other organic berries. we are susceptible to the same SWD challenges. Before SWD, we didn't have that many natural pests to worry about. Most of our planting is using cuttings, or what Paul called the maxi plug, which I have pictured there, which is a little bit heftier plug that you can use with a vegetable planter and just put them in the ground. And you probably save a year on the maxi plugs, but over putting in just a hardwood cutting. But they do, of course, cost a little bit more. I have done some green cuttings, and I'll get maybe 50% success with that. I'm not so meticulous with the watering, whereas the hardwood, I've always had 98% or better. The first year, weed control is really important. Mulching is good. If you use plastic, you're going to have to pull it up because it'll inhibit the plant from spreading and developing naturally, and there's also certain rules on the certified organic side. But with mulch and compost and water, that does really well. And then once the plant gets established, it does compete very well against the weeds. But in that first year, some of your weeds are going to grow faster than those hardwood cuttings, and that can retard your parent success. I even know of a few growers who had hired help, and the field just looked like it was weeds, and they just went through and they mowed the whole thing down, elderberry and all, and then they got really concerned about it. But in most cases, that elderberry still came up the next year. So it's pretty tough, even when it's small like that. We use grasses and legumes in between the rows that has to be kept mowed. And for your organic controls, you want to keep that mowed, and you want to keep your rows from getting too wide so they get lots of sunlight and air. And when we put the cuttings, we put them in every 2 feet, and usually 12-foot centers, because that works for most people's equipment. And we don't want any flowers the first year. Next, please. A couple other points here from our years of experience and what we prefer. Some of the elderberry are more leaning, weeping, waving, moving, and others are more upright. And in a field situation, the more upright is better for a number of reasons. And then the other thing that we have picked up from the Europeans, when we had an international symposium hosted by the University of Missouri in 2013, and we had researchers from all over the world there, and farmers from Europe, and some from South America, and researchers from South America, and we were all talking about elderberry. And in Europe, they always harvested the lower flowers, and that made so much sense because the berries don't set as well, and they're more likely to get heavy and they get down in the grass, or they could get in the way of mowing. So harvesting flowers from about a yard high and down, or even 4 feet high and down, seems to be a good plan. And you're not really going to use that much berries, and you can use that as a part of your field maintenance. And if you can sell the flowers, then that helps offset the costs and labor involved and committed towards field maintenance. Most of the native problems, the fungus or cane borers, aren't very big, the mites, but we do have variable deer and bird pressure, and that is something that is strictly, each farm is in a different situation. We didn't have very much at Natura Farms of either deer or bird pressure. The Blue Fruit Farm, the Riddles down there in Winona, who are members, they had a lot of deer pressure and bird pressure, so they had to completely fence it, and they had to net all of their growing area. Other places will use cannons or air cannons, propane cannons to scare birds away, and then there are different approaches to deer fencing. Some places they just some states allow you to hunt with a notice in this, and the deer are pretty smart. And once they realize that's going on, they leave your elderberry alone until you can get it harvested. Next, please. Okay, hand harvest and labor in the harvest is really one of the major challenges. And most of our growers end up harvesting themselves or with a team that they're using, and with some friends or neighbors and family who come in because depending on how many cultivars you have, and they do ripen slightly different periods of time, you could have 3 to 6 weeks max on your harvesting time. And when you harvest, you must destem them and sanitize and pack, freeze them the same day. They will keep a couple of days in the cooler, but they degrade fairly quickly, and they are much easier to handle, and we have a much better quality, and they'll store better if you can get them frozen the same day. And those are the standards that Terry Durham set up for River Hills Harvest, and we have adopted those in the co-op. And you might not know at the time, but Terry was elected as a director to the co-op here in February when we had our members meeting at Moses, and we are expanding the co-op membership from coast to coast at this point. But he has developed some mechanical assist, his destemmer, which we own one, and washing. Other growers are experimenting with some other approaches, screens, rotating screens, different things, conveyors, modified grape destemmers. I can tell you plainly that as we increase the market here and the demand and the production, and people start seeing the money, then we are going to see technology advance. I had the opportunity in the late 90s. I worked for Pillsbury for 5 years, 2 of those in engineering, and it's amazing what you can do with that machinery. And I've seen some very inventive stuff that growers have put together to get things done, and I have good confidence that we're going to see much less labor involved in elderberry crop handling in 5 to 10 years from now, and that will help. And that will help improve the profitability. So if we can make it now, then I think the increase in scale and experience will just add to our economic viability. Okay, next please. So is there enough demand? Well, 3 years ago I would have said most likely, but now I'll say definitely. I've been going to national shows for 4 or 5 years. I've got discussions at various levels with about 12 different national brands who want elderberry ingredients. I have commercial, regional, and national brokers and fruit who want this, and they want the frozen fruit. There's even more demand for puree, and I could do if I had 500,000 pounds and could convert it to dried berries, they'd be sold. But there's not a lot of profit in dried berries because they come so cheap from Europe. We'll get to that a little bit more. But as a grower, looking at this from your perspective, and we're all different. We all have different land. We all have different objectives on what we want and why we farm. So elderberry is kind of flexible that way. It's very fine as a hobby crop, and most of our members are small scale, and they sell directly into the local market, and we encourage that and we support that. We'll talk about specifically how we do that a little later. And then I give some overview here about what our current production is when we have a good harvest. What happened this last year, in case you're wondering, is that it was too rainy up north when the flowers were in bloom, knocked the flowers off, and then it was too dry in the southern parts of the Midwest for most of the rest of the year. So it was an unusual combination. We had a number of our smaller growers were fine, but it hit our commercial, our larger operations particularly hard. Next, please. So this is just making the point. These are a couple of our members in Iowa that are not focused on berries or specialty crops. They're doing other things, corn, soybeans, and hogs. Next, please. So how do we make this pay? And this is where a grower cooperative comes in. When we were doing some ingredient studies and feasibility studies on what it would cost to dry berries and would it be how we could compete with European imports, et cetera, we couldn't afford to hire someone to dry those berries for us. And so this is where, and elderberry is not unique in that. I mean, this is where grower cooperatives come in, Organic Valley, et cetera, where they get involved in the value production. And, you know, corn, they're doing ethanol plants. That's not just for fuel. They do vodka. They do other kinds of things with it. So with a co-op, you can pull together your resources and you can find different solutions and come up with different crop ingredients, and you can find ways and develop ways to help each other, and pooling resources, sharing resources, and so that you can compete in a world economy, so to speak, global market, big boys, you know, the Cargills and ADMs and folks are huge scale, and we will never likely get anywhere close to that, but we need to be large enough so that we can play in the game and supply ingredients in sufficient volume to provide stability for our growers and to support thousands of acres of elderberry. And so this is why I turned to a co-op. It's an old idea that I think works particularly well in the state of our economy today, and has, I think, the ability to deliver suitable profits and suitable economic return to people who grow elderberry, and that can help them succeed in their whole total farm program. Not necessarily, again, thinking of elderberry as needing to be the primary crop, but that it can be an important source of income. And through the co-op, we can also diversify the growers' exposure to the marketplace. And we'll get to more to that a little bit later. Next, please. So we do support direct sales. I refer people. We have a website. I get hundreds of people every week. I don't have to do any advertising. When we started selling dried elderberries on the website, we got behind 3 weeks right away, increased our production and kept up with it, and we have hundreds of customers with no advertising. I've got, and of those customers, there's 2 or 3 dozen or small businesses who want to use the local native elderberry, and rather than the imported, and they're willing to pay a little bit more for that. And that's the key, is a little bit more. And right now, frankly, I've got to look over our success and what we sold things for, and work with our grower partners who are involved in the drying, and see what we can do in the pricing to see if we can increase the share of that goes directly to the raw harvested crop. But here's the thing. There are a lot of different ingredients, and every ingredient is going to have a slightly different market and a slightly different scale of size and how it breaks down in profitability. And so as a grower who's a member of the co-op, as a commercial grower, as opposed to someone who's just selling directly, you can share in that. And it's kind of like you're getting higher volume, you're going to get a lower price per pound. Now, if you're selling directly off the farm, you can easily get $5 to $7 a pound for frozen, cleaned elderberries. That's not a problem. We have a lot of growers that do that. you can get $15 to $20 a pound for fresh flowers. And that is a market that is there. And the key is that you have to have access to it, and people have to know that it's available. It's not just something they read about taking place in England as part of a royal wedding or something. The other thing about it is that by getting larger size, having more growers and greater dollar volume of the crop, we will get more research from the universities. And as Elderberry, if you get a chance, go to the website and you look at the work that's already been done on its health benefits. I mean, in short, it's got 7 different antioxidants, twice the levels and variety as, say, a tart cherry or cranberry, but it's not nearly as bitter, and that makes it an ideal ingredient. It's got a positive Brix or sweetness. It's about half the sweet of the grape, and that means it can blend really well. So its potential as an ingredient is huge. And I have talked to folks in the fruit business, in the soda business, in kombucha, and many other things, and they are all extremely interested, and they'd like to have a part of this. And so it's just a matter of making it happen, and then being able to offer fairly high volumes consistently. And this is where sourcing through a large number of growers in the co-op can help us to nail down these annual pre-sold contracts and increase their size year after year. Next, please. So this is a brief summary of the structure of the co-op. I do have all the bylaws online, and I have a more extensive discussion in print so that you can see what it's like. But we have 2 classes of member stock. There's the Class A, which is just basically that you are a member and you get a chance to vote. Everyone must be a Class A member. You have to be a grower, and but then that way you get the vote in the elections and you get to serve in the co-op. Class A shareholders do not share in the cooperative profits and losses, and so it's a very simplified thing. This is mainly for the growers who are doing their own value added, and we have a lot of them that make their own syrups, or they make their own. Some of them run wineries, and some of them just sell to local restaurants and jam makers and things like that. And this means you participate in our research, you get access to the information, and as a member, if you don't have enough crop or you have a bad year, you can buy from the co-op at wholesale prices, and you have priority over everyone else because we take care of members first. The Class C share ownership, this is where you participate in the commercial aspect. Every share represents a pound of berries that the co-op is obligated to buy every year and that grower is obligated to deliver. And you participate with the board in determining prices and policies because, you know, it's got to work for everyone. The grower has to make money. There has to be enough money for the administration. And then whoever buys from us needs to be able to get it at a price low enough so that they can make money when they turn around and make whatever product they are doing. And so we do have preferred shares. These are for investors only, and they don't vote. They don't control the co-op, and basically they're there because they believe in what we're doing, and they get a dividend that varies each year as the board determines when we have profits. And so this is very brief, but that's what we have in short. Next, please. And so this is the commercial grower expanded a little bit. As I was saying before, one share equals 1 pound. As the cost is $2 a share. You have to buy the shares in advance. You don't have to buy them all at once, though. And I have taken 3 pounds of packed berries ready to sell per share as well. And that of course is less money to you, but you know, it's also less value per pound than what you could get if you sold it. And so, you know, then it's like any other co-op, there's retained earnings, and the accounts are set up to track those, and we have it set so that every member is sharing proportionally to how many Class C shares they own. So let's say if there were 10,000 Class C shares and you owned 1,000 of them, then you're sharing 10% in the profits and losses. And there is a distribution that comes at the tax time that you need to report. And we do our year end the end of June, so this comes out before most people's calendar year end, so it's easier for you to plan. And so sometimes you could have profits or losses but not receive cash. That does happen sometimes, just so that you know. Next, please. And so again, all members, commercial growers as well, have access to the overall inventory so that each grower keeps their business running. As long as we have it, you'll get your share. We have set up, the members have determined at this point in time that when the harvest comes in and the pounds of berries are assigned or delivered to the co-op, they get 75 cents a pound soon after harvest. So that would be no later than November. And then the rest of the value of the crop is shared at the year end. And so this means if we can sell both frozen berries, we're going to get a higher markup than if we're selling a dried berry or puree. And the nice thing is about this is that the Class C share owners, the commercial growers, share in every product, every ingredient that the co-op does. And so you're diversifying your risk. You're going to have different profit margins in each ingredient. There's different risk factors there. And it means that you're not committed to just one particular kind of thing. So if we, you know, one year we might sell more bulk, another year we might sell more puree or whatever. We'll try to take the best advantage of the market to get the highest price, but we do have that flexibility. And then we can exchange a certain amount of money for dependability and repeat customers and knowing that we've got it sold in advance. Next, please. So here again, because of the high labor involved and the scale and size and agribusiness, it seems that for us to deliver the kind of margins to make it profitable for our growers, that value added is required in this specialty crop. Now, if you're selling direct, that means you're doing the value added, and you're going to get higher margins for the berries that you sell directly to consumers. It is a lower volume, but that may be still plenty of money for you and works for your farm. As I mentioned earlier, we have people that do their own jams, they do their own pies, they do their own syrups and different things. And, you know, every state law is a little different what you can do, but they're doing their value added because they want to. Other people don't want to do that. They just want to grow the crop and sell it. And that's where the co-op participation comes in and the Class C commercial share, because basically the co-op takes it over from harvest and sells it, and you share in how well we succeed. Now, the other thing here is that a lot of times if you're doing farm direct, what your opportunities in front of you are going to vary significantly with where you're located. And if you're near a large metro area, you'll do better than others. And so I can see time is going by very quickly, so let's keep going. Next. And this is some prices. You can come back and look at it. I've all mentioned this, but this is here with some facts for you. Next. This is another example. This is in Salem, Iowa. They grow elderberry and aronia and some things, and they They make their own wine and meads and things. And that is the oldest family farm in Iowa. The same land's been in the same family since 1837. Next, please. Import competition, I mentioned this. One important interesting thing here is that wild collected in the European Union means certified organic, and yet there's nothing invested in those soils. And so that makes it hard to compete. And they have, you know, people who are seasonally employed. They'll go out and they'll gather all this elderberry, then they bring it in, and they have the infrastructure that's been in place for decades, and they don't have the same high level of quality in the way we handle it here. And their berries don't taste as good because they've got glycosides in it, whereas the canadensis does not have the glycoside or protocyanide. So they do a lot of concentrates, powders, extracts, and dried berries and flowers. In the syrup, it's more processed so that they can get through the mass handling, the fact there's more bits of stem and not even ripening, etc. Next. The European market, just as an idea, this is an overview. They have over 30,000 acres. So the 22,500 I projected was less than Europe. And then it's got the major countries where it's there. They don't destem when they harvest right away. And as you can see, the price per pound is pretty low. Next, please. So we're looking at trying to compete with all of this. We can't ignore the global ingredient biases and low prices. So we have to compete on higher quality, locality, and kind of like take the same approach to elderberry that the Japanese did after the Second World War, getting into transistor radios. Basically participate in the market, make enough money so we can survive until we learn how to do it better and can make more. And that's where we're at. And I think technology, we have huge potential for advances in technology to increase scale where those profits will come. There is a risk of U.S. market acceptance, but that is, I can't exactly say it'll be the same as in Europe, but it is much larger than where we are right now, and that's for sure. Next, please. We probably right now are harvesting less than 500 tons, mostly in the Midwest. The minimum return you can look for is 75 cents a pound, and that's, but our target is $2 a pound to the grower, and we are selling for $3 a pound in commercial volumes. That'd be like, you know, 10,000 pounds or more. So, and we do pay a premium of 50 cents a pound for certified organic. The cost difference in certified organic to growing good sustainable berries is not much because most of the cost is in the labor. Next, please. So part of the reason for the co-op is what I call network redundancy. In other words, you want to have multiple options, multiple channels, multiple sources, multiple quality grades of fruits. So this way you can always be in the market, be selling things, and have a lot of ways to sell your crop, because I don't want to have crop that's not sold. Next, please. And the thing with that redundancy, it means that there are different ways that each grower can sort of fit into the plan. Here are some options, and I broke down roughly on the ingredients between fresh, frozen, more processed like the puree or syrups, IQF berries, extracts, concentrates, natural dyes. And here the thing to understand is that each ingredient, because of the competitive marketplace, is going to have a different price expectation from the buyer. It often has a different channel of distribution, market capital requirements. And so I'm working through all of this, and we have an organization called AURI here in Minnesota, AURI.org. It helps with this, and we have current projects on a number of these ingredients. So we are in the process of developing. It isn't just total imagination. They are viable projects, and we're at various stages. Next, please. This is the example of pricing on the dried. You can come back and refer to this later, but this is taken offline through competition and from distributors, and this is how we go about it. Next, please. Co-op produces this elderberry jam for River Hills Harvest. Just an example. We do work with our growers. Different growers may want to specialize in different types of production and processing and value adding, and we can go in there and scale up where it's appropriate. Next, please. River Hills Harvest is our main retail brand. That's what Terry started, and we've made the decision here that we're now going to transition all berry sourcing through the co-op to River Hills Harvest, and this will help us to have better control and knowledge and understanding of our sourcing of product and better plan the sales so we can grow them and make sure that we're getting the crop sold as best prices as we can across our membership. Next, please. We're in Hy-Vee. We're in a number of other distributors. It's the retail is very difficult, and with the fact that we start out by paying the growers as well as we do for the River Hills Harvest products, it's hard to compete with the other organic and natural products out of there because our marketing budget is much less vis-a-vis the price of the product as compared to most of the other things out there. Next. That's why we need to go to ingredients to establish it as a commercial. So my goal is 2,500 producing acres sold by 2025. Mostly I'm going to have that pre-sold. And we'll do this by moving ahead in multiple ingredients, multiple retail channels. And basically, it's a decentralized program, and so it's going to depend on the development of regional hubs and how those can scale up and it makes sense in each case and area as far as the aggregation of the harvest, storage, and what they're able to produce. But we definitely need more growers, and we do have a number of hubs in various stages of development. I think that's it.
All right, sweet. Thank you so much, Chris. That was wonderful. I'm going to go ahead and open it up for questions. So if you have any questions, go ahead and drop it down in the chat box. Or I'm going to open up the the frequently asked questions, the Q&A. Yes, Q&A. So I'm going to start the so those on the phone for the Q&A session, you can enter *6 if you want to go ahead and speak your question aloud through a mic. So Chris can hear it directly. If not, just go ahead and put your questions in the chat box, and I can go ahead and read them from there. So I'll give everyone a couple minutes to think of questions. All right. We have a question in the Q&A. Oh, no, not anymore. Okay, we have one. All right. Allison, you should be ready to go. Allison, you there? Okay, I'm going to go back to Allison. She might be having some trouble. Okay, so we have Sue.
Is the line open?
Yeah, it's you're ready to go.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, this is Sue. Quick question in terms of, I'm at the early stages of thinking about scaling and becoming a more significant grower, and just wondered, sort of what size, you talk in terms of acreage. Are you talking multiple acres, single acres? Give me a sense of a reasonable scaling for a solo practitioner hobby farmer.
Chris, I think you're muted, so
oh, well, I can't see. I didn't.
Yeah.
No, wait a minute. It's not allowing me to speak?
Oh no, I can hear you now. Yeah, you're good.
Okay. So really, I always suggest that people start out small and see how much work it is and grow it up. And the other thing is that by using cuttings, if you start with like a 1/4 acre even, and then you see how it is to handle that. But if you decide to grow it, you can, use your own cuttings. So financially, it works pretty well. And the other thing is that there is usually a lot more work required that first year on field maintenance, because you've got to keep those weeds down, and you've got to make sure that the cuttings don't dry out. A lot of people put irrigation in when they do the installation. But I don't know, maybe you didn't hear me earlier. I think up to 2 acres, a small production can handle that.
Okay, good. Thank you.
All right. Any more questions?
See, part of the thing is once you get, even at 2 acres, you will be challenged on the processing when you harvest, because it comes pretty quickly. But you're not having to really get huge scale as far as storage and freezing and all that kind of stuff. It seems to be pretty manageable, and there are increasing options on the destemming. Terry's destemmer is very dependable. That's what we have in the co-op, but other guys are working on stuff. But above 2 acres, you really need to be organized, and there'll be significantly increased investment in the equipment.
Okay, great. And we have a question from Michael. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Okay, Michael, you should be good to go.
Chris, what do you think the production is going to be starting this spring? Do you have an idea how many acres you're going to be looking at?
I am a bit at a disadvantage. You see, the co-op as it was last year, we had 20 members, about 18 to 20 members, and most of our members were in early stage or smaller, like Blue Fruit. They never were going to get too large. Now with the changes and Terry coming on the board, and we're adding his network of 72 growers, there's a lot of additional information that I hope to get a better handle on as we move towards the June workshop meeting, which is the largest grower, not collaboration, but congregation. We all come together. That's the largest grower meeting where you're going to meet the most growers, is at that Terry Durham's Elderberry workshop in Jefferson City. It's June 10 to 12. I've got it on the events page. Yeah. And so, I would say that we won't have a good idea until July as to how it's looking, because it's basically going to come down to berry set. I mean, I never would have thought in the past it hadn't been an issue where, you lose all your flowers and so you have no berries. Because of heavy rain, but that's what happened last year in northern Iowa and southern Minnesota.
Okay, so June or July. Okay.
July is the most likely. See, because then we'll have some idea, and people will be harvesting flowers, and that's important. I mean, 2 years ago we sold almost 400 pounds of dried flowers, and it's like 8 to 10 pounds of fresh flowers for 1 pound of dried. And what Terry has done on the flowers, by the way, he's now destemming the flowers and freezing them, and he's already produced a few cases of elderflower syrup of high bricks, which I think will sell very well. So we're making good progress, but the information and the knowledge of just where we are as far as total crop production is missing right now. And that's one of the reasons why we made this decision to restructure the co-op and open it up so everyone could be members, because I can't go and make a commitment to someone who could be a major brand buyer and tell them that I can deliver them 100,000 pounds a year, unless I know what the whole picture is, because we've got existing customer in River Hills Harvest. We're in over, over 500 stores. We have a lot of volume there. And I can't go backwards. I want to go forward, but I'm not going to go forward at such a pace or in such a way that I'm threatening the ground and what we have. So when we make a commitment and we have something working, we want to keep it working and grow that and then add something else.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, great. And then we have a question from Judy in the chat box. She said, you may not know the answer to this question, but people are dehydrating berries and flowers. Does this need to be done in a commercial facility, or can this be done at home?
Okay, so this depends on your state law and who you're selling to. and so we have both of our drying productions are commercial, in commercial kitchens, and that's on purpose because we're selling to people who are using them as ingredients in their own products, and so we have to, meet all those requirements. But if you're just selling some straight off your farm, and I don't see where I'd be too surprised if the law put too many obstacles in your path. You can dry them in a lot of different ways. You can hang them on lines, etc. But with the dried berries on our project, you had to get them dry enough so it was like 12 to 14% moisture was the max that you could have it and have a safe berry. You needed that 14% or less, and then that reduced the water activity to the such that it would stay and keep for a year, of course, enclosed in a bag, sealed. I think we haven't paid for more tests. We'd probably go beyond that, but we haven't paid for that, and that's what AURI came up with.
All right, great.
Was that a good enough answer?
I think it was a great answer.
I mean, really, you do. It's hard because every state is different, and it is a lot more flexible if you're just selling directly, and the people know who you are and how it's produced. But of course, you want to keep things clean. It's just there are little rules that don't always make sense. And you've got to know what those are. And I have found, anyway, in Minnesota, our State Department of Agriculture and the University Extension Service are there to help with that. And so check with your state, and I'm sure you can find that help.
All right, great. And then, okay, and Judy has a follow-up question. She said, I noticed that Terry said that he is using a different sanitizer for his berries. C2 maybe, question mark? Yeah, if you could elaborate.
There's basically you have either a weak bleach solution is permitted, and Terry, you have to understand, Terry has been through the FDA, so FDA approves all that he's doing, and they're out there regularly because we're in a lot of stores, relatively speaking. I mean, we're still small, but we're doing a good bit of business, and he's been really good. He's got good relationships with the FDA, and he had to wrestle back and forth some to keep the processing to a minimum so we could get good taste and deliver elderberry stuff that still had nutrition in there. But the other option besides the weak bleach works on some kind of peroxide or other approved vegetable and fruit washes. There are a couple others I've seen out in the marketplace for that. I'm not familiar precisely with the one he's using, but if you come to the workshop, he will tell you.
All right, and then we have a question from Greg. He said, any thoughts about running chickens through elderberry fields?
Well, I know they do that at the Main Street Project in Northfield, and they are a member, one of their farms anyway, Regenerative Acres. Or Regenerative Farms. We have handful of members who have regenerative in their farm names, and I can't always keep everything straight. I'm sorry. But and the issue with that comes like with any kind of organic fruit or vegetable is manure and length of time from manure to harvest. And so if you can work around that, and that's not an issue, or if it's just for yourself, running chickens through there makes a lot of sense. And in Main Street Project, they do shade their chickens with both hazelnuts and elderberry. That's Reginaldo, in case you guys know him.
Okay, great. And I think that seems to be it for questions. So thank you so much, Chris, for all of your insight and talking in just more detail about what you guys do. And I guess we're going to close it up for the night. So thank you for your time and your knowledge. And for everyone who's still here, I'll be sending out a recording of this talk. And if it's okay with you, Chris, can I send out the slides?
Oh, yes, please do. I would post them online anyway. I saw one I needed to make some corrections to, which I will do. And do go to the website. There's a lot of information there. As I was saying earlier on the reports and grants page, I mean, there's a 45-minute USDA film of me from a presentation from Iowa Practical Farmers. I've got Terry's decks. I've got some other presentations I've given, and there's articles and references. And you go through that and see that that'll answer a lot of your questions. And as many of you know already, I do answer my phone. I was on the phone today for about a half hour or so with some fellow up in northeast Iowa who's interested in growing. I said, well, you send me an email and I'll find a grower near you who's willing to talk to you, and you can talk to someone who's growing in your area. And we try to do things like that.
All right, sweet. Yeah, so definitely if you guys need help or want to reach out, go ahead and contact Chris. He answers his phone, which is great. I know some people don't.
Sometimes I wish I had, but I just tell them, nope, you got the wrong guy.
Exactly. Okay, everyone, have a wonderful evening, and you too, Chris, and stay tuned for the next Nutshell in a couple weeks.
Thank you, Jess. Take care.
Right, thank you. Bye.
Good night.